So welcome everybody. My name is Nicola Conibere and I'm here this morning speaking with Chris Matthews, who is a choreographer and visual artist and performer. We're going to talk a bit about his work, we're going to talk a bit about his experience navigating neurodiversity as a dancer, as an artist. And we're going to see where the conversation takes us.
Yeah. Yeah, we are here today to discuss my practice, but before we dive into that, we felt it is important, as my work is about community and togetherness, visibility and collective support, and we thought it was important to acknowledge that we are aware that there's a current boycott of Sadler's Wells in relation to a sponsorship with Barclays. And we did not want to pretend or not acknowledge those who are here and not here, who are working to start a conversation to divest. Sadler's Wells has been a huge support of my work over the past years, and I understand the situation to be complicated, but I just also wanted to acknowledge that there is no funding for this commissioning, and also production funds that have come from Barclays for this project and my previous projects with Sadler's. And just to say that I am in line with that. I'm not a supporter of the genocide and any forms of war or violence. But thank you.
And the boycott is organised by Culture Workers Against Genocide, if people wish to find out more information about that. So we're in a space of conversation. The structure, we came up with a loose structure, and the structure is something like this, that we will talk about Chris's work, including Act 3, as part of a trilogy of works that Chris has been working on over a number of years. How many years has this been developing?
Since 2016.
2016, so 8 years. And we will speak about Act 3 in a little bit more detail. Some of you may have seen it yesterday, some of you will see it later today. And then we're going to talk also about ADHD is a choreographic practice, about what it is to navigate being a dance artist and being neurodiverse. So this is our proposed structure, but in embracing the spirit of ADHD, we recognise that we may sprawl all over the place a little bit. We may jump back and forth between these things. So structure is there as a kind of a support, yeah. But we leave ourselves space to jump around. Also to demonstrate that in jumping around, there is one acknowledgement I haven't made, which is important, which is that this talk has been commissioned and organised by Independent Dance, of course with the support of Sadler's Wells, who are hosting it. So.
I'll just also have to mention I'm loving this smooth feeling. So we will swivel a lot as well. Our hip sockets are getting lubricated. So I'll tell you a little bit about the trilogy.
The trilogy.
Yeah. So the trilogy is called the Desire Cycle, and it started, well, as all my works are really about, I am a performer at heart, and I still perform, and for me, my work is always investigating what it means, or how, what performing is, or how performing, how I question performing, or aspects of the practice of performing, and I'm going to say performing a lot. But the thing is, because I started to question too myself as a dancer, not just that, because I come from a background of being a dancer who was mostly worked in repertory companies, and so my job as a repertory dancer was to be able to reproduce someone else's work, and I was trained in that way too. I was trained in the Hawkins technique and also in various neoclassical ballet. And so a lot of my work was about learning how to reproduce my, but not, to only give so much of my identity. And it was about, actually in 2016, I was performing a work by an artist, and I started to, it was an artist who is, well, he's a heterosexual male who was making a piece about two other heterosexual males. And it was this kind of, and I was like, well, that's the ultimate of homoeroticism, which is the the viewing of the male body from the male gaze. And so I was like, okay, well, that's somewhat okay, but it also made me start questioning my whole dance career and the fact that I was actually complicit in performing a able-bodied heterosexual male. I was always a townsperson in the ballet, in the second act, which is also another reason the frustration of why I make work is because I was never a prince, because I was never tall enough, and always a little bit pudgy. So I always played the character roles or the townsperson. So for me, I started to think, wow, I actually never acknowledged this, and I started to question more around how I never saw my identities, both physically and conceptually within the works that I was performing. So this led me down to such a rabbit hole. And what I should also say is that part of, we'll get this later about ADHD, but is that I kind of over-research a lot because my brain just goes through so many different things, and I just go straight down to that one, and then I go over there. So this led me to really investigate my whole career. And so I decided I was going to make some works that would explore, first, homoeroticism and queering dance history. Because I do love dance history. Like, I love everything about dance, anything dance related. I'm such a geek about it, and emotionally in love with it so much. So I was like, let me just try to look at moments in history, things that I have done and things that I haven't done, and how could I rethink them and use dance history. And I became I acknowledged my love for dance history because I started teaching, and I realized that one of the first things to go in current education is dance history, because it's not fun to teach. Students just want to dance, and we want their money, so let's keep them in university. So we only do the fun things. And I came from training that was actually when you get really deep into the technique and you get deep into learning about the history, you start to find joy in it. And so the more my students hated dance history, the more I started to love it. So I really I was like, I need to investigate it, but also not denounce it. I want to work with it. So the first piece I made, in non-linearness, I have to also say, when the research started coming, I also have been slightly affected a lot by Saturn returns, which is in astrological cycle, your life cycles are a lot longer. And again, I'm no expert, so I will just say that I'll probably get it wrong if anybody knows better.
What is a rough duration of Saturn's?
28 years. So yes, so your life cycles are in 28 years, and so you're they say childhood is up until 28. And because by the time you're 28, basically you have been through all these kind of parental figures that are not just your parents, but teachers, and you've been through university, if you've done the real societal thing like you're supposed to, you've been through all those stuff. And so, and then you move into adulthood, and there's a 4-year transition from 28 to 32, and then it happens again at 56. And then I felt so proud of creating a trilogy for all 3 pieces, and then I just found out last week there's a 4th cycle. And so I'm like, no, it's a trilogy. So I don't know what to do with that information. We can talk about it later. But
I'm going to offer a bit of, so the trilogy, 3 books in the trilogy, each one part of 3 cycles of Saturn's return. And these works are called My Body is Number 1,
yes,
Lads, and Act 3, which is the work that is showing here at Sadler's this week. Wow, you've covered so much. You've covered so much.
This is the problem.
This is how to filter. So we've got dancing in rep, we've got complicity in modes of representation that feel disconnected, misrepresentation perhaps. We've got dance history, we've got loving dance history to go against the grain, and also Saturn's return. So I think the commonality, if we're talking across My Body is Number 1, as the first.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of chronology, that
So
it wasn't
yeah,
made
I
first.
made
but
the work
first
not in order.
Yeah.
So I started with Lads, but Lads is technically adulthood. But the first piece is My Body's Number One, which I made second, and it explored. Well, the reason for the first piece was to acknowledge this relationship with this history, and so I kind of started to look at with Lads. When I made it, I was thinking like, well, what's the history of masculinity? Where did masculinity in dance come from? And I always go back to this quote by Ted Shawn that said that men are able to dance if they look like the Greek Olympiads or the gods. And which is also really, like, in that period of dance history, there was a lot of work made around the kind of Roman Empire and Olympiads and all that stuff. And so I was like, well, if that's masculinity, how many people make it to the Olympics? It's so unattainable. So I made that work, but that made me really start to think about the second work, which is about how youth came into the question. And so My Body's Number One follows the 14-year-old ballerina in the Paris Opera Rats, which the Rats were the corps de ballet in the Paris Opera, and they mostly came from working class backgrounds, and they didn't make enough money in the Paris Opera, so a lot of them doubled as prostitutes or working for visual artists as models. And we all know Marie Van Hoven's body, but we don't know her name, which is the 14-year-old ballerina. And but basically, you see all these pictures in the Surrealist period with like Degas, and there are all these men in these kind of smoking rooms in the Paris Opera. But what you don't really see, which is also there, are the mothers of these rats who are literally selling off their daughters for the evening. And it made me really question also the difference between high art and low art and this box. So they dance on plinths. And for me, it was like, what's the difference between go-go dancing and a Greco-Roman nude on a plinth? And when I first moved to London, I did go-go dancing at the RBT. And I started to think, oh, I have these different lives too as a performer, moving into the high art and the low art. And I wanted to find that intersection, which is the ballerina.
So in My Body's Number One, correct me if I get any of this wrong,
Yeah.
You have two dancers, there are two plinths that look a bit like plinths from art galleries or museum, and a dancer on each plinth, and then moving quite slowly. So there's a clear reference to kind of the go-go dancer, but also the sculpture on display, the body on display, perhaps in a gallery or museum context. Mm-hmm. But they're moving through a series of gestures, right? Yeah. That are from sort of the ballet mime lexicon.
Yeah. So each of the pieces have different elements to them. They have something from dance history, they have something from art history, and then they have something from pop culture, because I'm obsessed with 90s pop culture. It is like the reason I'm a dancer is because I've been striving to dance for Janet Jackson my whole career. And so I'm still. So it's really important that I touch these things. And so My Body's Number One, what I wanted to deal with is number one hits. And when I originally made the work, I thought they would do multiple songs, but I ended up just on one song, which is Ed Sheeran's Shape of You, because I found it also super misogynist. And everyone loves this song, but I was like, wow, he basically just said, the shape of your body means that you're right to be my wife. And I was like, but this is so problematic, and the whole album, I actually wanted a refund for the album. Because the whole album is like horrible. But I basically took the lyrics of that song and I translated it to ballet pantomime. And so they perform these gestures back and forth to each other, where they sing that lyrics, that whole verse or chorus, I don't know music, to back and forth to each other, but through ballet pantomime, whilst gyrating really slowly. And I guess just one other thing to say around the the plinth and the height and the way that they're for me the service of a performer. Sometimes we're at service for people who are watching us, and so they are gyrating, but they're ignoring you. And I just remember one of my job as a go-go dancer was to be on the box and be sexy for people, but I didn't have to engage with them. So and it was great because I love to dance, so I just would get to go to a club for free and get free drinks, and so I could just dance on a box and have my own dance floor. But I didn't know that also I was being looked at, and I was comfortable with that because my career is about being looked at. So the performers don't acknowledge you; they only acknowledge each other. And also the same way that sculptures in museums, they don't acknowledge you; they're just looking out into the distance on these plates. So yeah.
And should we touch a little bit on Lads then as well, which is the second work in the trilogy. So this is kind of the middle line.
Yeah.
Or no, this is we've 4-year transition from childhood to adulthood.
Yeah.
And back in Saturn's Return.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Lads and lands in this, and so again, like I said, I was trying to figure out where it went wrong in my career around masculinity and what is masculinity in dance, because also I never questioned it because it's so camp, and I never talk about campness, but my work I think really there's something about camp. I have a video series where called Untitled Video Portraits, and I just do facial choreography for music videos, and it's all about analyzing the gesture and the boundary of what is the gesture in relation to gender and campness. And this work, I was like, what's the history of masculinity? If Ted Shawn thinks it goes all the way back to those Olympiads, how do I organize it in that way? And so I've created my own false timeline that starts with sculptures that have been deemed homoerotic sculptures in times leading up to the Barberini Faun, which is in the Glyptothek in Munich. And this is really important. It actually shows up a lot in my work, this faun, because I went, someone told me it was the sexiest sculpture, and I was like, it can't be sexy. And then I walked into the museum, and from 2 rooms away, I was like, oh my gosh. And so I was like, it's true, there is something around that's related to that, and I tried to put it in history, leading up through also certain roles, male roles in ballet and early modern dance. And so in the back of the room you can see the poses. I'll leave them there for afterwards, but basically I put on the floor is the source material of how the works work. And so you can see my timeline over there. And so, but when I did my research, I also realized that masculinity was defined by Plato. And he would hang out with the boys in the yard and talk to them, and because he thought masculinity was not just about physical body, but it was also about intellectualness. And so he used to hang out with the Olympiads and just kind of try to talk to them. And so I was like, okay. And so I realized that Plato ruined my life. But I thought that the intellectualism lost over time as well, because everything has become about cultural, image war. It's about the images we see, all the magazines about physique. And one of the things that relates to my dancer career is that my technique has never been questioned. It was my physical body that was always being questioned. And so that's what Lads does. Did I answer it?
The invitation was to talk about it.
Yeah.
I definitely spoke about it.
Yeah.
I have a question though about what is my question? It's something to do with the image of the body and something about representation and character. I think partly because when you were talking about your early career and dancing in rep companies and finding yourself being called on to embody these roles that you felt involved masking some part of yourself. That these were characters. These were characters within perhaps narrative-driven works.
Yeah.
And if I've got that right. And how could you find a way to talk about character or a resistance to character in how you work with displaying bodies across the trilogy?
I mean, in relation, what I have done is I have reduced the image down to an image. I have reduced all the like individual physical traits to just actually coming to a concept that allows for anybody. Now I say anybody, but because it's different life cycles, I do work with specific performers who fit within the criteria of the life cycles, but not within the criteria of any particular physical body. And because something I was trying to figure out, and I was telling you the other day that I was like my whole master's was about figuring out what people see, not what they do, because my whole career has been about my image, not about my physicalness, and so I wasn't really sure what was going on there, and so now I feel like I'm really trying to just test that performing isn't a visual art; it's something you see, and how does the individual body itself create the concept or infects you to think about a certain concept. And for me, it's about shaping and keep shaping and shaping the physical movement so that we see that body. So I'm not necessarily dealing with character because I'm also not interested, I think now I'm not interested in performing or acting a performance or acting a character. I'm interested in who, like what is the real presence and identity. And even in my performance work right now, I work for Choreographer, a choreographer, American choreographer who works with voguing and postmodern dance, and also what he works with other references as well. Buddha. I know. I was about to say Buddhist, and I was like, stop Buddhist. Stop thinking Buddhist. Stop thinking Buddhist. It's Buddha. Yes, we work with Buddha, which is also just about the self and we get really wild, and then sometimes or a lot of times we even cry. But there's also the invitation isn't to cry every performance if we have to cry. It's only about the authenticness of crying if you do. Or taking yourself into a state so that you have this authenticness of crying. That I don't imply any acting techniques that make me cry. I just present myself. And so for me, I'm not interested in character anymore. I'm interested in the truth and how do we be vulnerable as performers to put truth there, which leads to the last piece, which is really I think the work that I think I fully have come full circle and put the truth out. And in rehearsal, we just kept talking about just be yourself. Yourself is enough. And so the final work is Act 3, started from a few different references. But when I made a ballet that went to the Edinburgh Fringe in 2005, and the reviewer said that it reminded him of Macmillan's Romeo and Juliet's bedroom duet. And because he said it was so sensual and the passion in it was reminded him of that specific duet. And I started to think about, because there's desire is the line that goes through all of them, I started to think about also my own life, like what is desire? Will I spend my life alone? Like what's happening in my future? And so I wanted to think about, well, what is desire? Like, and I still have desire, so why do we only see it in society as youth? And we go back to Plato Symposium, because I was having a conversation in that same artist's piece that I was working in. I had a conversation with somebody, and I talked about love and how I felt about love, and they said, well, you should read Symposium by Plato. And I read it, and I liked it, but I also was like, but they're talking about youth. And so does love and desire for love only, like, why can't we not talk about it in relation to youth? And Romeo and Juliet is the ultimate love story, but it's youth. They're teenagers, don't be fooled, because they're played by older adults, like 90210. But you know, like, it's, I mean, or every American TV show. They're 30, everyone. No. I wanted to understand what is love and desire now, and where in dance history are we not showing it, and why is dance history not showing it? And I came to the idea of the muse as well, and the muse is another through line that I don't talk about but it's there because I ADHD and I have to like only talk about a few things when I talk about the work or works. But the muse is important. The second piece, my body's number one, is also about Pygmalion a little bit. And this one I was thinking about Barton Mumont and Ted Shawn and the relationship between Ted Shawn and Barton Mumont was a performer for him, but they also were lovers. And I wanted to understand that balance between the muse and the romantic lover and how those lines are really blurred. And so I started using that as my inspiration.
I wanted to ask you something about looking.
Yeah.
So we're talking about bodies as being on display. We're talking about representation of certain experiences. You're talking about truth.
Mm-hmm.
In My Body is number one, and in Act 3, I think the acts of looking, of performers seeing each other, seems to be a really really powerful central part of the work.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday, when I was watching, I found myself when I was watching specific performers, it tended to be those who were watching the person who was moving on the mattress. I would see the person on the mattress, but I spent a lot of time watching how they were being watched.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how the presence of watching in these performances relates to the desire you've just been speaking about, and how that might be how that might communicate this image, as well as truthful experience, but also how it might relate to community, because that was another powerful part that I got from watching Act 3 yesterday. Was there's an intimate watching by the performer who is directly behind the person performing on the mattress, and then there is this small community, this small gathering, who are also watching carefully.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if you could say something about that, watching, desire, intimacy.
Yeah. So watching is something I before. I mean, I didn't think about it in the first two works, but I did. I have been thinking about frame in my work, and I work under the title Form View because I'm interested in the fact that I, the artist, can shape the frame, can shape what the performance is and how people see it, but I know that that's being authored by the performers doing it. And as a performer myself, going back to the performer politics, I have never, there's a lot of times that I haven't been credited for the work I do because I'm a performer and my job is just to be the vessel, not to be acknowledged. And so I have been really thinking about shaping and for people to see something, but to see the performer. And I questioned that audiences are not passive spectators. I really want to make them active. So I tried to put them in the position of witnesses. So for me, audiences sit on the outer circle. They're witnessing the event. And in this particular piece, it only happened quite in the last bit of rehearsals. We were sitting and watching the whole room, and we realized that the duet that was happening wasn't enough, and I wasn't sure about it. And then we looked and saw also the other performers waiting and looking, and then we talked about the fact that also becomes an experience, that also community, which is this desire I've been wanting. But to go back to a concept I was talking about 5 sentences ago, seeing has become important too in my practice as a performer. I think more so when I was doing classical dance, I knew exactly where to look and what I was looking at. But I started teaching in musical theater, and I started to have to think about what is dance in musical theater. And so I've been seeing a lot of musicals. And I have been thinking how do we know what they're looking at? And so I've been also now retraining and taking acting and directing classes. And a lot of it is about seeing. What do you see? What is your target? Declan Dawn talks about you can't just look over there. You have to have a target. I'm looking at that table. That's my target. And so for me as a performer, I'm interested now in seeing my target. And so I think it's influencing my work as well. I want them to see each other, I want them to be seen, I want visibility to be there. And so how do I do that? I don't make people passively watch, I try to shape the view so that people really look, they really acknowledge. So yeah, seeing is a practice I'm still working out at the moment. But it's new to me, and I think it's also changed the way I also, like, it really helps because also this summer I performed in Avignon, and we performed in the Palais de Pape, which is like 2,000 seats, and I was like, how do I reach the back row? And that means as a performer, I needed to have my clear target of seeing the back row. I didn't need to just perform and see the first 15 rows. I needed to see all the way to row 52. And so this seeing thing has been like really important. Yeah.
I'm noting that there's a difference though between a staged work where you may, as a performer, be working to a targeted kind of point of sight or connection, and kind of what a work like Act 3 offers as an installation work, which is also an invitation to have your mind wander. And there's a particular quality of being with a performance very meaningfully whilst also staring out the window or at the ceiling or noticing who's coming and going in the room. And that invites a particular kind of presence with the work, which is its own defined experience, which has some qualitative differences from sitting in a theatre and watching. I mean, I still think about putting the washing on and what I'm having for dinner when I'm sitting in the theatre. Yeah. But it's the possibility to look around in a situation such as Act 3 is very present. And I noticed also that it came in relation to this particular space. It connects to the wider foyer. You hear voices talking downstairs. I think there was a cocktail party here last night, which all fed into the wider ambience. Mm-hmm. It affects looking, but it's also our entire sort of receptive system.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is about pace, and so I don't consider my works performances. I actually start, because I've been analyzing and talking for years or investigating years about how dance is a visual art, and how I want to present it as a visual art, even if it's not in a visual art setting. I started to think about how do things exist in museums and what is the time that they exist in museums, which is that those sculptures are there when the doors open and they're there when they close. And so I wanted to think about that as an aspect of choreography, that's the time and pace, but also at the same time challenging. Being ADHD, I'm also a very quick performer, and that's and because I also come from a jazz background, and so speed is something that I've been doing it, and I can just, you can give me a fast movement, I can do it. And so when I wanted to investigate myself as a performer, to mature as a performer, I was like, well, I should not just be doing what's natural to my body and I can just do, because we all have certain natural talents, and mine is speed. But actually, if I need to engage with the adagio. And actually, when I go back to when I was 16, I had like a really shift in my training, and this is when I decided to just stop doing it and to say, this is what I will do. And it started because I went to Jacob's Pillow, and I worked on the Ted Jean works, and I learned them, and I was like, actually, this is what I'm going to do. And one of the things like back then was I have to start loving the adagio in class. And because I hated it, because you're like, oh my God, your leg is out there, and you're like, I have to hold it up. But where speed, you just kick it and go. And now I'm coming back to that again. I'm coming back to challenging my ADHD impulse and to try to slow down and to try to sustain energy and projection at a slow pace. I was telling you about this piece that I absolutely love doing, by an artist Franz has a vaulter, and I just had to stand on a metal platform and slowly move across it a meter within an hour to 90 minutes. And for me, it was the most challenging performance because I had to think, how do I go 90 minutes, go a meter in 90 minutes, but also how do I not look boring? What do I need to do to not look boring, which means I need to slow my pace internally. And I also think about this quote by, I'm really bad with names, I'm a visual learner. Well, we'll come back to the name in a moment. But the quote she said was that you should dance on a cellular level, and you have millions of cells in your body, and how can you... Deborah Hay, yes, Deborah Hay! I love dance history, but I'm bad with names, sorry. So I've been trying to also engage what does that mean, and how can I use all the cells in my body to slow down too. So that's more about pace and challenging my natural daily speaking and impulse. I'm an impulse buyer, that kind of thing. So
when you're talking about the challenge of that work, how to move slowly across a platform, it makes me think about, again, a part of Act 3 in which you have the two performers who are doing the duet, and they're circling each other. Mm-hmm. But they're doing this on a mattress. I was thinking about the mattress a lot. Yeah. Yesterday I was thinking of it as a kind of symbol and sight that promises, intimacy, rest, play, adventure. I mean, there's many words we can add to that, but what a destabilizing material it is. If we go back to your previous works in the trilogy, so My Body is Number One on these solid plinths, Lads Happening on a solid floor, and then we have the presence of this mattress that can be quite difficult to navigate, or at least brings in a whole other set of physical challenges to move slowly, particularly when one is engaged in eye contact with another person. So I wonder if was there something about the physical destabilizing in that process that sort of answered this question about how to embody interestingness or appear interesting when engaged in a really simple task of moving in a single direction slowly, or does it connect?
For me, it has two things. Its ultimate goal is to create an intimate space, and nothing's more intimate than a mattress. And a mattress also that is, it's not made. I mean, there's a mattress cover on it, but there's no sheets on it, and so it really has this. It plays that role of being that kind of. It plays the plinth, it gives the platform, but also because it has no sheets, it's a bit also the underground seediness of a hookup. It's like so it has that level of intimacy that you can question, but also for me, the fragileness of standing on top of it is challenging ideas of youth, but also conceptually, I've been thinking about how the world isn't. It's built for ableness and also like neurotypicalness, So I feel like the world, like everything, including just to be really open, like including applying for some sort of disability benefits, also goes through neurotypical systems. And I was just having a conversation with the person the other day and being like, you lack empathy because this whole thing is neurotypical. And you're supposed to be supporting people who are not neurotypical. And so the system is built that way. And even the world is built in a sense of making it fragile for all ableness. And ableness that changes when you, as you get older as well. And surfaces are not, I just find it really fragile. And so I wanted to heighten that idea that also the surface that people are living on are fragile, and the performers we talk together about what their abilities are and how do we keep a framework, but we support those frameworks and don't hide their abilities. So it's a part of who they are every day, how they move in the world, And I don't want to manipulate that, but I don't want to hide it. I want them so that their identity is present and visible. And so yeah, the piece is about that fragileness of the world we're living in.
You've mentioned visibility, invisibility, and we have spoken about this a little bit in relation to disabled experience, disability, neurodiversity, but also in relation to the subject of this work, right?
Yeah.
We've spoken about experiences of masking, of being in a situation in which one seeks to mask some aspect of their identity in order to pass within a certain system, kind of systems you were talking about. I wonder if you'd like to say something about the interrelation of those things, of the need to hide one's identity in certain situations of performance or everyday life.
Yeah, I feel like I was having this thought when I was coming here today about also something that happened about something in my work, not just about disability. I also deal with working class because I come from a working class family, and just thinking that also I'm the one of only 2 people who have gone to, have passed high school education in my family, and what I also think about is that in dance there's class structure as well. And I feel like I'm a working class artist in the world, but also in the dance world too. For me, I'm interested in how do all those disabilities come available, but also how do we make them beautiful. And I'm not interested in apologizing for it. And one of the things we talked about, is messiness. And I embrace that my practice and everything that I do is messy and doesn't fit into the frameworks that also, especially the dance world, is looking for. And for you to progress in the dance world. And so for me, my work, I want to challenge that or bring that visibility around that everyone is looking for neurotypicalness, a package that's also able to describe what you do, what you look like, and how does that work, so that we can then profit off of that work. I also as a little side note, I talk about my hobby. I have a hobby of applying for high-profile jobs. It's like a really great hobby. Because I also feel like messiness and identity and neurodiverse people are not running the English National Ballet, which is a job I applied for. And I just feel like these companies need to start having more presence that have the breadth of the dance world and the art world. But those positions, and of course somebody said to me, well, you know that those people will never be in that company. And I just felt like, thank you for your middle class for saying that to me. But that's why this is my hobby, And I would take the job if I got it. So if anyone's hiring, but the thing is that, but it's because my desire of becoming a choreographer started when I was a child, studying dance and thinking actually what I want is to maybe have a company and make work and also support other work and stuff. And I'm doing that. And that's also what comes together about togetherness. So if I have this is a very particular piece because it's about an installation and it's just that, but when I have an exhibition, I try to bring other people's work to my exhibition, even if it's my work, like my show. But I have a problem with having solo shows because I just want to make space for other people and because I feel like that's how a lot of the working class dance world works. We support each other through togetherness. And I think this Act 3 itself is also, there is this togetherness that is about this desire for what I want my life to be like with the queer family that I have. And so for me, try to practice that. Of course, I can't do it perfectly, but I try to practice that in my work and in my personal life. This communing together to support all of our needs and possibilities and lack of possibilities.
You've also spoken before about understanding your ADHD as a choreographic practice itself.
Yeah.
That functions in relation with this community experience of family.
Yeah. I mean, ADHD for me, I masked it for so long in my dance world, like in my dance career, because you weren't allowed to be neurodiverse, especially when I was working in ballet companies. So, you had to be on top of your game. You had to not be impulsive and forgetfulness or messy, as I like to be. But then I started to think about it, how can I turn it into a superpower? Because I'm also really good at taking in loads of information. I watch a movie and I also notice where all the electrical sockets are on the set while I'm watching the movie. And that's because my brain needs to have all these other things going on so I can focus on the main event. And so I started employing it as a superpower to be like, just embrace all the information. And then I guess I was telling you about how I started thinking about my practice as, I call it organized chaos, is because what I tried to do is I tried to put everything there, but then it becomes so organized that through the chaos you can see that. And I know that that's part of my visual way of representing my ADHD. Like my brain is going on really at the moment. I notice every bus that's passed by that window while I've been talking to you. Like that's really what's happening in my world. And I wanted to try to embrace it as a choreographic practice, to not just be like, well, I need to be focused and the work has to be focused. But you mentioned the other day about when you've seen the other works and they are very clear. And I was saying that there's so much research behind it that then it's like when I wash dishes, I have to have a TV show on. So that sound allows me to focus on the one thing. So all the research behind this work and all these works allows for it then to have a clear focus image in the product. And that's my ADHD as a presentation.
I read an interview the other day with Percival, the author who wrote Erasure. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? It's the novel that the movie American Fiction was based on. But this novelist who's written many great works of literature, talking about how he wrote some of these. No, it's not. Anyway. He was talking about how he wrote entire novels whilst having Mission Impossible on at the same time, because it supported a kind of focus. But yeah, I remember. What strikes me about many of the terms that are associated with ADHD, some of which you've used, sort of messiness and chaos, a kind of like navigating a constant multiplicity, is that often I think or if we think of the stereotype of like the ADHD boy on Ritalin who's like manic and can't control sort of outbursts of energy and shifts of focus, and that does seem to be in contrast to the aesthetic of your works, I would say, which, as you say, have a sort of really clean aesthetic, like in terms of design, costume, the concept, the number of actions of work, even though complexity may be there. There's an aesthetic cleanness, but it strikes me that also belies this kind of myth about what it means to live with ADHD as neurodiversity, and how that might, again, it goes back to visibility and invisibility, how that might manifest, and how that might be expressed, and how that might be visible to others or not.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, I'm also, in the most recently, as I've been saying about being just who I am and authentic, and even the way I perform, I'm not interested in this masking. I'm interested in just being visible for the way that I act and the way that I think, and also because I was, I think when I made this shift is someone had said, when you make work, it has a little bit of imposter syndrome in it, because you're trying to be like the art world and be really serious. And why don't you just, I have been to Disney World 65 times. I am currently wearing shoes that are designed like Mickey Mouse's shoes. Cool. So I come from a very particular, crazy, fun family. And so why do I make work that is that? Like why am I doing this, masking, being invisible about who I really am, to be portrayed, to be serious, so that I can become the artistic director of English National Ballet, But why can't I be like wearing a horse T-shirt, like that, like just be who I am, and bringing that visibility, and also bringing that fact of that I can like, ramble, or can overshare, or it's all about now just allowing that to be present in how I present myself as a professional, but present in how I make work, because I am really clear about what I do, but I think people see it. I was once meeting with a curator, and she said, "It sounds like you don't know what you want." And I'm like, "I absolutely know what I want. I just have ADHD and overshared everything with you." Like you just literally learned also that I had an avocado salad. Like honestly, I told you everything, but the thing is, I didn't get the gig because she thought I had no idea what I wanted, or I didn't know what my practice was, and I was like, I know my practice so well. It's just that I don't know how to not tell you everything, including what I ate, so that it also fuels what I make. And that's true. And then it makes me think, well, then that's just not the person that will see me for who I am, what work I make. And I think that's, so being more visible, I also feel like also the opportunities, or the type of opportunities I've gotten, have actually grown, because I've just become aligned with people who understand what I want when I make myself, like when I just ramble.
And do you think that's also partly because these sort of relationships of exchange, the professional exchange between, say, the artist and the producer or the programmer, are to some degree have a friendliness to them?
Absolutely, and it's part of the togetherness.
Right.
A couple of years ago, I did a show here called My Body's an Exhibition, and I'll always remember this one specific moment, which is, if you weren't able to see it, or if you did see it, basically I kind of got carte blanche to the building. I mean, I don't know if they actually gave me carte blanche, but I did take carte blanche. I just basically put, you walked through the front door, and there were 35 different choreographic works, both from live, video, prints, everything. And you walked through the whole building that led you through the theater into the backstage area. I put discos in the dressing rooms so you could dance in the dressing rooms with disco lights. And it got to this point where we also just kept walking through it. And then also the tech team kept, they kept being like, wait, we were thinking this. And I was like, do it. And but at first, the person took me to the gel room. And they're like, it's really lovely. There's lots of gels in there. And they're like, what color do you want? I'm like, purple. They're like, well, we got this purple and that purple. And I'm like, well, what do you think? And he was like, well, what do you want? I'm like, no, what do you think? And they said to me that they're used to nobody asking them what they want. They're used to saying, bring me purple number 65, R, and they do. And I don't like to work in that way, because again, breaking the hierarchies of like, even in my work, behind the scenes, I want to break the hierarchies of, my opinion doesn't matter. My opinion, like, it does. Not my opinion, but I want you. If you love what you do, then we'll all work together. It's about community. Keep bringing the community together. Bring me whatever purple you think is the best purple, or what purple you love. Like, what's your favorite purple? We can pass around the mic, and you can tell us our favorite purple in a moment. But like, I don't want to just be like, this is, give me this, give me that. As a dancer, I've had so much of that work, especially working in companies, told to do, and I don't matter. And I'm not concerned with that, even in my working practices with theaters and programmers. I want to, I almost blur this line of friendship. But I don't know if it's friendship, it's more about community. It's about making sure that everyone feels respected and is a part of it, and they're participating in it. My work only exists because of the person who brought me the purple. You know, like I really recognize that person. And I really recognize also the people who don't get recognized in theaters, who work here. You know, the staff who cleans, the staff who's checking our bags. Those people are part of this whole process to make the shows happen. And we only see the choreographer, we only see and then next we see the dancers. But actually there's so many people and we're a community. But it makes me want to also say a really important thing to say is that because someone said to me once, so I used to have this collective and we used to share a rehearsal space and we called ourselves the industry because someone once said to me the reason we don't get paid in dance is because we're a community. And I was like, well now we're the industry. But I still believe it's a community. I think it's a community effort to support and bring dance together and keep dance going.
I wish I knew my pattern colour charts so I could tell you my specific favourite.
Purple.
But this is actually a moment when we can begin to pass the microphone around, so you can share your favourite purple. But also, you know, we're talking about collaboration and community, and I'm conscious also that there's a number of performers from Act 3 in the room. So, you know, just to extend a huge thank you to those of you who we were able to see performing yesterday. It was so wonderful. And several of us will see later today as well. But we do want to open the space to conversation, question, comments. We're going to pass a microphone around because this is being recorded. So I'm going to do that now. Would anybody like to? Yes, there is a hand up. Hi guys.
Hi.
I don't expect we expected this, right? If I was going to be. Anyway, so obviously, like, it's just been fascinating listening to you talk. And it's just taking me back to uni when you taught me, and it's, you know, you've really put my entire degree to the test, and thank you. But yeah, my question is, do you think that your practice is an act of rebellion? Because that came up. That thought came up, and you were saying, oh, I want to reject certain things, but I want to. Yeah.
I know what you mean, and actually, it's actually quite an interesting question because I've been climbing the emotional scale with this. Is that actually when I first started making work and thinking about making work in the visual art world, and I was like, let me question the role of performer. I started really thinking more about how we were treated. And so I made work to highlight the fact that we were treated poorly. And so then I was making work that I was trying to rebel, but I actually felt like it wasn't successful trying to rebel. And that's when I was accused of like this idea of like not actually showing my true self. And so I'm not trying to rebel, I'm trying to change the dialogue or be, not that I'm capable of change, but I just tried to do it differently because that's important to me. So I'm not doing it now to rebel, I'm doing it to create an alternative perspective. And that's in relation to everything, like even, as I'm saying, the sense of community or sharing the experience or acknowledging the experience of making a work or making or coming together in a show or making an exhibition. This community, I could be the person who tells people what to do, or I could be the person who leads everyone to do what they're very good at. And that's what's important to me. So yeah, but I just, an interview I just posted today that I did, I do acknowledge that I also continue to work out of spite. So I'm not trying to be rebellious, but I am trying to acknowledge, because for my very first dance class with a Russian ballet teacher who made me step on a scale before going to the door, said to me, "You will not make it." And I was like, well, I'm here today at 43, and I'm still going, and so actually I am going to make it. And the shape of my body isn't going to do that. And every day I am still reminded of it. I mean, even yesterday, someone gave me a compliment, but at the same time said I was memorable because of my body shape. And I'm like, every day I experience it, and people don't even realize it. They think they're giving me a compliment. But they're like, oh, I remember you in Jadal's show. You know, I mean, how can I forget you? I mean, you know, you were so good. And I was like, thanks for the compliment. You could have left out the previous sentence because I'm a good dancer, okay? And I don't need to be a good dancer because I'm large. So I am here because of spite. I am here because I wanted to do it. I saw Fame as a TV show at 5 and said I would be a dancer. And then Janet Jackson influenced my life, and I'm still here. So yeah, I don't know if I'm rebelling, but I'm trying to change the dialogue.
Hello. I'm going to ask you 2 questions.
Awesome.
Beautiful. I'm curious, I suppose, at what point in your career you feel you've acknowledged ADHD and that impact. So if that's another more recent thing. Question 2, at what point do you also acknowledge like your privilege in dance and art spaces? Because I suppose you spoke a lot about your ADHD and where that's sitting for you, but I'm also curious around, how you acknowledge the space that you are taking up as well. As a kind of, a dual question for you.
Cool. So ADHD, I mean, I've been diagnosed as a child, and of course I took Ritalin all the way up to the age of 19. And so I've been acknowledging it, but I've been actually trying to work against it. And I know during COVID actually is when I started to acknowledge it more, and that's because for me to exist, I do need a lot of stimulation, and then I found myself in my studio flat, so one room. Not even a living room, like one room. I could see my oven from my bed. And my world shrunk. And actually it was really difficult because actually I was all of a sudden faced that I didn't have the overstimulation that I needed to exist. And so that's when I was actually like, I can face it. But I have been working on it unconsciously. And it started when I did do my master's, and I had my master's, my installation was that there was a performance going on, or a improv of one performer, but I had 12 different types of artists and writers respond at the same time, and then that all was fed to 12 different TVs. And you could only, the audience, watch it through the TVs. I mean, you could kind of see between the TVs to see what was going on, but you also weren't allowed to really watch it. You had to witness it from the responses of the 12 artists. And so this was also my beginning of thinking about ADHD as like, what is your way into a performance? Is it writing? Is it the image? Is it photography? Like, what is it? But then COVID made me really think that actually I can't exist without overstimulating, and how can I actually start thinking it as a superpower? In relation to privilege, I mean, I think, as I spoke earlier about the idea of like, even within the dance world, we have our classes, and I feel really honored to be in a space like Sadler's Wells. But that also, I think, has only been because of other people that I feel align with me and other artists. I see the Artists of Day program, and they also believe in that this space should represent not just, fancy people who wear Prada and then make dances, and you're like, but people who who don't have the financial support to do all that high polished work. But yeah, I am aware that also I'm a white male, and that has some privileges. But I also, I don't really understand. I don't know how to respond, in the sense that I understand that I am here, but also I understand I'm also here, and I shouldn't be. There's a dichotomy in that. Yes, like I have $150,000 student loan that I'm not paying, so that I can be here. So there are lots of other things that like I feel like I teeter the line of not being able to be here, but also yes, me being here maybe means someone else isn't. But that whole world, the whole world is now built on that. So I'm not acknowledging that I'm privileged, but I'm not acknowledging that I'm not privileged.
Hi. I'm sorry, I'm going to take it back to masking. I know
Sure.
we've talked at length about masking. Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Only because it pertains to a lot of research I'm doing right now. And I have a question about masking as a necessary evil, in the sense that you've talked a lot about how masking and masking your ADHD specifically helped you to sort of be successful in the industry that you were working in, but then going through the process of unmasking and evolving has allowed you to like open up a new level of your artistic practice. And so I have a question surrounding whether or not the masking and unmasking has to be a necessary evil in a way in order to like achieve the new evolution of whatever XYZ ...
Yeah, I mean, the unmasking, so part of that, I didn't give the full quote, but when they said to me about imposter syndrome, they said, you know, you should just have more fun with your work. And actually by unmasking, I've had more fun. And in a way, actually, I think I have expanded what my possibilities of what making work is. But I think it depends on what I wanted to do. And when I really wanted to exist in this, especially when, I decided to leave ballet because I was tired of the fact that here are your roles, but here is also the diet you need to do it. And so I felt like if I wanted to continue down that world, I have to do a lot of things. And so I don't know if it's necessary or unnecessary, but I decided to have a choice that if I'm not going to become this big, crazy, wearing Prada, maybe I should have a lot more fun. If I'm going to have this student loan, I should have fun. And so it's one of those things, I don't know if it's a necessary evil, but I think I just wanted to live differently. I also wanted to not feel, as much as I want community around me, I wanted to feel a part of the community too. And so I thought for me to feel a part of the community is also just to be more authentic and more visible. But I think I do know artists who are really fighting to be in a certain trajectory, and it is necessary for them to mask because they will not sustain the career trajectory that they want if they don't do it. But doesn't mean that other companies aren't making that happen. But I do think, as much as there are so many problems here in the UK, coming from the US, I find that there's so much more acceptance of disability, I don't see in the US dance scene. And so and also even in some European countries, I have friends who are like, we don't have the same support in Germany for like disability and arts as they do in the UK. So I do think there's something really nice in this country that's doing a little good, not great, but who can do great in the systems that we're working in. So yeah, I think it has to depend on how you want to live, and I've decided recently to live in a more messy, authentic, unmasked way.
Hey, I was thinking about costume, and you talking about kind of your working in ballet and being asked to perform these characters and your dissatisfaction with that.
Mm-hmm.
And this interest in performers in this trilogy being in a more authentic or truthful way to themselves. But then, all three of these works is a very specific look. And I kind of almost think of it as a look rather than costume.
Yeah.
I think, and I'm wondering what it's like for those performers to kind of find that look and own that look, and if that's important to you that they do own it, and how you support them, or like I'm assuming for some of them it's very easy, but I'm also assuming for some performers they need to search for a while to get there, and what's that process like?
I mean, if also the performers want, I know pressure, but also if they can speak for it. What in this particular piece, specifically the first two pieces, because there's something autobiographical about all three pieces. And the first two pieces, they were lived experiences, so I kind of knew how to deal with what the autobiographical part was. In this work, I knew that it's a future self, so I haven't lived yet that autobiography. So in this work, in the rehearsal process, along with everything we did, we took also, so the work itself has different layers, that there's movement, that's slowly moving on the floor, on the mattress, and then there's a dancing together, and then they speak to each other, which you don't hear it, they speak to each other. We took each of those levels and we did each of those first. We did just the talking, and then I opened the space for everyone to share. How are you feeling? What do you want to do with this? Because this is you are the performer, you are the work. So you are going to be vulnerable. So I made sure to stop rehearsal in time to check in with every performer, and actually, I felt like we spoke a lot in rehearsal, and I think that was more important than moving, because I wanted everyone to feel comfortable. I want everyone to voice what they have to say and hear what each other have to do, because not only are they being vulnerable to the audience, they're being vulnerable to the performer they're performing it. I call it the gifts. They have 3 gifts in the piece, and they give the person they dance with those 3 gifts. And once those 3 gifts have been accomplished, then the other one takes their turn to give the gift. So I just allowed the space to be free for people to say what they needed to say and how they said it. And that helped me shape also the work. And that's again back to acknowledging that my work under that title of Form View is they are really the authors of it. You know, I'm just the person who's shaping the experience, but they are the authors. And I want them to be visible. So by doing that, I had to listen. So I did a lot of listening. Yeah.
Hi, Christopher. I'm newly arrived from Australia, so I haven't had a chance to see your work. But I am a little bit like you. I'm old school, where I was trained, where I was weighed, measured, and conformed. As you do as a young dancer, you don't have a voice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very interested to hear that now that you are maturing and you have this amazing voice, does that give you, obviously it gives you this amazing authenticity, but that's not available for a lot of us as young dancers.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel that the work is progressing now? I mean, do you feel you have this amazing freedom to be whatever you want?
Mm.
How to explain to younger dancers who don't have that freedom.
Yeah.
Like you have to perform the repertoire or whatever. You know, what does it feel like to now feel that you've got complete free reign?
I mean, first thing is also that this has influenced also teaching. So I teach as well. I teach at the university, and I teach I don't teach because I want to be a teacher. But I also think that I'm really concerned about the future of dance because I love it so much, and not just what is being presented, but the inner workings of how it's being presented, programmed, and So I think to be able to help with that, I must teach so that I can produce different dialogues with students today, so because they'll be the next ones making those decisions. And so, in one way, I'm using my ability to be in a university and to affect, even with resistance from the university, I try to speak to the students about how they can change or how they can do it differently. And so, I still teach a very formal technique class because I think if you have technique, you can do everything. But I also talk to them about what is that thing that's you, and how does that come out in you. But personally, it's, for me, as I said, I just have more fun now. Also less shame. Even, it doesn't matter, I used to, I always have this image of every dancer doing a perfect, like their perfect solo, their perfect variation, and still running into the dressing room crying. And you know, like I'm just like, wow, that was gorge, you know. But it's true, you know. We're just taught that it's not good enough, and it's again that goes back to that Ted Sean, you know, Olympiad. It's unattainable. So I don't know. I just have to just be like, you know what? I'm still here and I'm still working, and I only align myself with people doing that. So like with Trajal, you know, Trajal Harrow, who I work with, he wants us to be us. Like I said, he doesn't say cry because I want you to cry. Cry if you can, not can, cry if you want to. And so I think for me, it's been necessary to just, participate in trying to shift from an academic level, but also just being vocal about it. So anytime I have a platform, have the privilege to have a platform about it, I speak and I just talk about it. And I actually don't care about naming and shaming. I don't care, you know, because, you know, I've gotten in fights with really important choreographers on social media because I've named and shamed them to expose what they do on an inside. And I'm okay with that. And I know that also maybe that prohibits me from progressing in certain places because I'm, you know, because I've called them out on their, you know, bullying within the process. But the only thing I can do is try to do it differently and develop a community and try to be around people who also do it that way. So yeah.
I better find a question.
Yeah.
I was reflecting on something. I was reflecting on the running into the dressing room.
Yeah.
And crying, and what it is to have places of refuge. And thinking about the different communities you've named as being kind of places of refuge as well. Places where one can go to be oneself or release whatever needs to be released. And I realised we haven't spoken about Fire Island.
Oh yeah.
We haven't spoken about Fire Island and Pajama Collective.
Yeah.
And this is partly a circling back, but it seems to me there's something also of Fire Island being this place that was available to go and be intimate and construct images that were otherwise that those visitors didn't feel able to embody in other parts of their life or make visible in other parts of their life. Can we talk about Fire Island?
We can talk about Fire Island. Well, first of all, I guess something we're talking also a lot about care and things. But the thing about Fire Island, and I'll come to that, but is we haven't also acknowledged pop culture. Like for me, and Fire Island will come to that, but pop culture is really important to me, and I think we all have fun, and so we want to put music on that we enjoy, that makes us feel good, and so I put that into my work, a lot of pop culture, and for me about community. So I feel like more so when I do exhibitions, less than these isolated works, I create spaces for people that I started thinking that my practice is in interior design because you come and I fill spaces with objects and things. So like, I just did a show with 350 mirror balls. But really I was showing line drawings. Like the artwork were these line drawings that were identifying the postures of the males, because a friend of mine who was a drag queen and I was early young homosexual coming out in New York City, I was like, well, how do you know who's gay? And they said, well, look for the broken lines. So I make broken lines out of artworks through line drawings. But it's this thing about community. So I was a club kid as well. And so I found refuge in club spaces. And so I went out raving all the time, and then I would walk to ballet class at NYU with glitter in my hair. But it's because for me to go to ballet class, I had this beautiful night of community and dancing. And so I'm always looking for community. And I started thinking, with this piece, I wanted to read more about the times of the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s when a lot of homosexuality was still illegal. And it led me to reading a lot about Fire Island, which in New York City is a beach that is quite difficult to get to. You have to take a train and then a ferry, and then you have to sometimes walk 40 minutes. But in the 30s and 40s, it was a place for a safe space for mostly gay men, and yes, mostly gay white men. Though James Baldwin spent a lot of time there writing as well. Like, you know, that it wasn't predominantly, but yes, predominantly white gay men. But it was a place where they could go and lay on the beach and be together. They could have sex. They could, you know. And again, in my work, I don't explicitly talk about it, but there is a weird boundary in dance history. Dance history has been fueled by sex, and you know, like I talked about the prostitution of the ballerinas, but also like the muse and all that sometimes is about actual tactileness and sex and commitment. And in this work, I wanted to think about a future that I wanted in, you know, and with my queer family, we are talking about where do we live and how we're going to be together. And Fire Island led me also down the road that actually was also a place where a lot of art was being made, because people could just exist and be themselves. And so Act 3, so each of the pieces follow movement or poses, which is that's on the floor back there, are poses from different artworks. But Act 3 follows a specific photo collective called Pajama. And Pajama is actually made up by Paul Cadamis, Jared French, and Margaret French. And so Jared and Margaret were married, and Paul was Jared's lover. But they were really well-known painters in the 1940s in America. But in the summers, they would go to Fire Island and just hang out, and all their art friends and dancer friends would come, and they would just also take photographs. But these photographs have been hidden for some time and are only coming out now in the early 2000s. People are starting to see them, and now the Whitney even is displaying them. But again, it was like Tom of Finland. Like if you owned a Tom of Finland, it could be illegal. And it's the same thing with these photographs. They were illegal. And that was something that was important to me, was also, and why I felt like now is the time to make this work, is to also acknowledge a community that lived when it was illegal. And to talk about also how a lot of that secret, invisible visibility inspired the dance community. And actually, through my research, I came across the Pajama Collective and these photographs, and they're based off of this specific exhibition called Collaboration, which is the first time that all the works came together. And I used the photos to make the movement poses that they move between. But the thing I wanted to say about it also was that Lincoln Kirsten, who founded the New York City Ballet with George Balanchine, used to come also and hang out, and he would bring all his friends, and again, it was the New York dance scene, visual art scene would all meet in Fire Island to make work, to write books, to make photography, to talk about the next season's dances, but also to be together and make love and be friendships and support each other. And so I think that's also what's really important, is why community became more visible in the work, because the other two pieces are just a duet. And when I made the work, I was going to make it a duet, so it followed the same framework. And then yes, these other bodies came in, and because of this honoring of community. And we noticed also in the photos, even though we took one body from the photo that we reproduced, we also acknowledged that around those bodies were other bodies just like hanging out and were part of the whole. And so it was important to honor that. But what I wanted to share something really special is that I wanted to know who those people were in the photos. So I started looking at them, and I also started, I got to George Platt Lyons, which is another photographer of the time, who also was there and is in the photos. And also, it was quite funny because they'll be like having a photograph, and then someone would pop over to the other side of the beach and take a picture with George Platt Lyons. Like, it was all very blurred. And in these photos, why they go by pajamas, they don't acknowledge who has taken the photo. Like, they don't acknowledge who has pushed the button. So they just are pajama. But I started following the histories, and something that was really beautiful is that I found that one of the performers in the video, in the photos, of this and George Platt lines was way back when the founder of the ballet school I studied at. And because this ballet school has changed names 4 times, I didn't know its true origins. I only knew like 2 names ago, like when it was Tidewater Ballet. But actually, when I really followed the people and their histories, it led me back to my own story, which also made me really solidify that these photos were the right photos. Because when I think about the autobiography, I'm there because of these people in these photos, and so that was amazing.
The universe and cosmology and Saturn's return.
Oh my God, I know. Well, also, we talked a little bit also about being just present and authentic. And the person who told me about that, I had a major breakup at 28. Like my first boyfriend, and we were together for 8 years, and I didn't know who was me and who was him in all of our interests. And when we broke up, I didn't know what to do, so I just went through all these processes of I was like, well, maybe I'll read the New York Times person, or maybe I'll go to galleries, and I'm just trying to figure out who I was at 28. And then I was like, I just don't understand. So I was like, let me do like what every New Yorker does, and I got a therapist. And he said to me, I started explaining to him the first time, I was like, this is going in my life. And he was like, and at one point he stopped me and said, how old are you? And I was like, I'm 28. And he was like, oh, okay. He was like, we're going to sum this up in 3 sessions, but I'm just going to let you know. What's going on with you is Saturn returns. And I was like, what is that? He explained Saturn returns. But the whole thing also about authenticness is one of the things I was talking about is like, well, now being a single person, who do I perform for? And he was like, well, why don't you go and just perform for yourself? Like, don't need to, like, if you go on stage, just perform for you. Because also that's that marriage from within. And so that's also when I think the journey. So when I discovered Saturn Returns, I also started this journey of just being myself and not actually thinking that I'm a service for the audience. So I'm only performing for them and I'm just this like soulless person.
We need to finish.
Yes, we do.
So I'll say, do have a look at the references that Chris has shared in the back of the room. Everybody get a therapist, everybody perform for yourselves.
Yes. And decide what's your favorite purple.
Decide your favorite purple. Thank you all for being here. Big thanks to Independent Dance and Sadler Wells for supporting this event. Thank you to Chris's wonderful collaborators, the performers from Act 3. Do see the work later today if you haven't seen already. It's at 5 o'clock and it's free in the mezzanine space just outside.
No. Tomorrow, today
downstairs, sorry.
Last night it was here, but so that people going into the performance can see it, we're moving it over to the con room. So it's going to be in the con room from 5 to 8.
Other side.
So go into the stage door like a performer and go through to the cafe. But also, again, it's an installation, so stay 5 minutes or stay 3 hours, how long your curiosity is there. So, thank you.
Big thank you to Chris.